Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today's episode, we're continuing our coverage of the ongoing situation between Ukraine and Russia. And the rhetoric and tensions continue. We're starting now to see elements of the United States military being deployed to Eastern Europe. But again, these forces very light forces, elements of one brigade of the 82nd Airborne, some command and control elements, and some smaller, some mechanized elements as well. Could be deployed to areas of Europe. But again, the main body of this force is the 82nd Airborne Division. And again, not the entire division, not even an entire brigade, all unlikely more or less one battalion of the 82nd Airborne, possibly some Rangers as well, would be deployed to Poland and other areas, possibly as needed to reassure some of our allies. But again, the idea that this is a force that could be introduced to stop a Russian advance into Ukraine is farcical. It's just completely outside of the realm of possibility. Is it possible we could see U.S. Special Operations Forces, CIA forces, operating with the Ukrainians? I would say that's highly probable. Probably not U.S. SF guys, but again, probably ex-SF guys operating within the intelligence community, especially the CIA and quite possibly some contractors operating with the Ukrainian military as well. If and when we see the Russians cross into Ukraine. Now, what I also wanted to look at was the theoretical possibility of a Russian operation into Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Again, I really call this Operation Checkmate because I do not believe certain NATO partners would honor the Article 5 and go to war with Russia over the Baltic states. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to have a quick look at U.S. Army positioning in Europe and just kind of show you how really weak it is right now. And I think a lot of individuals harken back to the Cold War, where we had entire divisions and heavy armor units based in West Germany, and that simply is no longer the case. Those units are no longer there, and I'll quickly we'll go over and I'll show you exactly what the U.S. Army has in theater right now in terms of what you would even call its most heavy units. So first, we'll go over here to Vilseck, Germany, and this is the home to the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment. You can see clearly this is a sprawling military base in southeastern Germany, fairly close to the borders of the Czech Republic. So again, there is a capability here in Europe, but again, not that robust, especially in terms of heavy forces. Again, these are roughly 4 battalions, and they're all strikers. Again, these are light armored vehicles, and they do have some anti-tank capabilities. But again, they're designed to move around infantry on the battlefield. They're 8-wheeled armored vehicles. I mean, you can do a YouTube on the Striker if you want it and check it out, but that's pretty much it in terms of maneuver forces in Germany. Then, if you go over to just to the northeast, you have Grafenwehr, and this is kind of the Grafenwehr training area. And this used to be a big training base for when the United States had heavy forces in Germany. So, a lot of the tank gunnery exercises for the U.S. Army when we had heavy forces in Germany was at this sprawling Grafenwehr training base, and I'm sure the 2nd ACR takes advantage of the sprawling training area in Grafenwehr. But there are also U.S. Army units in Grafenwehr as well. There's an artillery unit here, and there could also be armored assets pre-positioned on a rotational basis that come here, and you can clearly see. Now, I don't know if they're Abrams or they're Leo 2s. Hard to say, but again, there are, as you can see here, these are Paladins, and you can see the artillery unit that's based here at Grafenwehr. But that's really it. Now, obviously, this base could expand, and we could move further forces into Grafenwehr to basically stage forces here. Now, the problem with that is again the Germans. It's highly unlikely in the event of hostilities. I believe that if hypothetically speaking, the Russians move into the Baltics, that the Germans would allow this to be utilized on their territory, meaning we may not even be able to move these forces into Poland to reinforce the Baltic states. So again, the concept that that NATO would be unified and would be ready to engage the Russians over the Baltic states, I would say, is very, very remote. Next, we're going to look at some of the pre-positioning that the United States has done, and predominantly what we're seeing this is over here in the Low Countries. So first, you have this area here, and you can see Google has done a great job of hiding this pre-positioned equipment. You can see they've clearly tried to scramble this a bit, where it's a little bit harder to see on satellites. But in this area, there's one or two heavy brigades worth of equipment pre-positioned in these areas. And just for fun, let's see. We can. No, you can't come over here and do a street level view. So that's interesting. Circle back around here. So that's one area where the U.S. Army has again pre-positioned equipment, and that would actually be officially what country this would be. Yeah. So this is in Belgium, and then over in the Netherlands you have further assets being stored. And again, this area was not scrambled out. And what's funny is you can go over to here and click this, and we'll just move this right over to here, and you can see physically kind of what you're what you're looking at. You can clearly see this is a secured facility, and we're just cruising on down the road here, checking it out. I'm sure the Russians do this all the time. I'm sure there's a GRU guy right now doing that someplace. But you know, at the same time, you can go into Russia and do this as well if you wanted to, and go back over here and check it out. Did it go back? There we go. What's this? Yeah, U.S. Army garrison right there. So again, pre-positioned stuff, and you know, this would be. Oh, get out of here. Here we go. This would be a little bit more challenging for the Russians to hit with cruise missiles. Again, if we're looking at as a bird flies from Kaliningrad, you're looking at, let's see the range here. So 600 and 700 miles basically. So again, the Russians could probably launch from submarines or aircraft over the Baltics, and launch cruise missiles at some of these sites to try and damage or destroy some of these pre-positioned assets, or bring the buildings down on top of the tanks that are stored in those areas. But again, the likelihood that the Germans would allow these stored units to move through their territory right now, I would say is unlikely. And what would happen is they would probably have to come all the way down through France, through Italy. Maybe they would come through Austria. Most likely, you would probably get pushback from the Austrians as well, and they would have to come through Slovenia. But then you have Hungary, and Hungary may not allow again these forces to deploy. So I think you can see what I'm looking at here is very, very difficult for NATO to augment its force construct in Poland to assist in any sort of reconquest of Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. So very, very difficult, especially if the Germans back out. So all these units that are deployed here are kind of mute. Now, with that being said, the Poles have been gracious enough to allow the U.S. Army to build a pre-positioning site here in Poland. And we'll have a quick look at that, and you can clearly see what's happening here. So not sure where we're at right now on the building of this base, but this is a major Polish installation, and you can clearly see that this is the area for APS-2, and these are Army pre-position stocks that would move again another heavy brigade and store them here in Poland at this base. Now the problem with this, again, you're very, very close to Kaliningrad now, and the Russians in all likelihood would just really put a lot of munitions on this area. They would probably do a saturation strike on that pre-positioning stock, given the distance that it is from Kaliningrad, so well within Iskander missile range. So you would probably see quite a heavy Iskander cruise missile or ballistic missile strike on that base, and it would no longer be a pre-positioning base. It would be a destroyed pre-positioning base, and that's the issue right now with NATO is it is really a fragmented alliance, and just go up here, you can see the Polish military base up here further to the north, and yeah, these motor pools all would get hit, and it wouldn't be a good day for NATO if the Russians again move into the Baltics, and NATO actually, or some parts of NATO then responds. Because on one hand, you would probably see the Poles respond. You would see the United States support Poland and try to support the Baltic states. But in the end, very, very difficult to then move those forces, especially if Germany puts the kibosh on it. I mean, what do you do then? You come around up through the North Sea and into the Baltic, but again, you're moving those forces into the Baltics. They're going to get attacked, and there's no guarantee that the United States would be able to move those forces into Poland via these contested sea lanes. Very, very difficult proposition. So again, it's either through Germany, which may say no, or around through France and some of these other states, and then I think it then becomes kind of a tricky situation, especially with Hungary and Austria. You just don't know what they're going to do. I think they've benefited from NATO, and they've used NATO, the NATO partnership, to improve its military capability, its own personal military capability for a lot of these nation states, but ultimately, would they move on Article 5? And I think the answer is absolutely no for some of these nation states, and that's a huge concern. And I think Putin knows this, and we'll see what he does. But again, very, very concerning situation. And I just most people don't really know. They think of NATO as being this really all powerful entity, and really, I think it's much, much weaker than people think in terms of NATO. Again, it's just not what it once was, and a lot of that has to do with these relationships now that we're seeing between Germany and Vladimir Putin and Russians in terms of energy resources. So again, not a good situation, and I think the United States really needs to reassess NATO. It needs to identify who our allies are, and I think it needs to also look at, where are we willing to go with Russia. And again, you can't look at Russia as you would look at Iraq or Iran or some of these other nation states that I think the American public, the uninformed American public, tends to do. They tend to group Russia with the likes of Iran and some of these other nation states, but it's just not the case. That's not the geopolitical strategic situation on the ground with the Russians at this point. So you have to look at them a little differently. And I don't want to say compromise, but again, you got to pick and choose your battles. And putting the Baltics in NATO probably was a really, really bad decision. And I think it's going to come back to haunt us. And I think it's haunting us now. Have a good day, everybody.